Hey, thanks everybody for joining us today on Georgia MemoryNet Insights. We're really excited about today's program. Today we have Dr. Candace Kemp, who is a professor of gerontology and sociology at Georgia State University, where her research focuses on aging, dementia care, improving quality of life for older adults and their care partners. She's a fellow of the Gerontological Society of America, an award recipient from the Southern Gerontological Society, where she's been recognized for her contributions to gerontology scholarship and innovations in care practice. And so today, Dr. Kemp will speak about her interdisciplinary work, Improving Care Through Improv, which integrates improvisational techniques into dementia care training to enhance communication, caregiving, mastery, and patient well-being. It's exciting and it's funny. So we're going to turn it over to you, Dr. Kemp. So much.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Johnson. It's a pleasure to be here to share this improv work, and I'm really grateful to Georgia MemoryNet for the opportunity and to Dr. Johnson for that lovely introduction, and collaboratively Dr. Johnson and Emma for making this all happen. And I'm really excited for everyone to be joining us today. So just quickly, I do not have any disclosures, and nor do any of the planners. As this session title explains in the introduction that Dr. Johnson just gave indicates, the presentation's focused on improvisational theater, or more simply improv, and how its skills are applicable to the dementia care context. So I have three main objectives for this session. I hope by the end that everyone will first be able to describe the research context for using improv. Second, understand how improv skills align with dementia care competencies. And finally, have a sense of skill application. But before we dive in, I want to note that I am not a one-person show, but rather what I'm sharing with you today is the result of several interdisciplinary collaborations involving multiple partners, including but not limited to Georgia Gear, Emory University, and Dad's Garage Theater Company. Also want to introduce you to my primary collaborator, improviser and educator, Amanda Lee Williams. Together, we co-developed Improving Care Through Improv, which is a set of training programs for members of the geriatric workforce and for family members and friends and others caring for someone living with dementia. You can learn more about Amanda by visiting her on her website, Improving Through Improv. Briefly, I will tell you that our training programs combine foundational improv techniques with basic knowledge about dementia and dementia care. And for those of you who are thinking why, well, as you know, I know you all do, that many people living with dementia can experience confusion and, depending on dementia type, memory loss, as well as significant and often unpredictable changes in personality and behaviors, and possibly difficulty communicating and expressing needs. Without having the appropriate knowledge and communication skills, healthcare professionals and family members alike can find caring for someone living with dementia challenging. So the underlying premise of our programming is that improv-based dementia care training can help. But before I get too far ahead, let me explain what I mean by improv. I realize most of you are probably familiar. Maybe you've seen Whose Line Is It Anyway, gone to an improv show, or maybe even taken a class. But just so that we're all on the same page, when I say improv, I'm referring to the theater context, which typically involves unscripted performances that are largely made up on the spot and are primarily collaborative. Yes, and is something you've likely heard before. This is a foundational phrase that encourages accepting what's happening, so the yes, and building on what others are saying or doing, which is the and. So for example, if Dr. Johnson and I are on stage and he says to me, "You're the best sister ever. Thank you for giving me your car." Thank you, Dr. Johnson, for saying that. Rather than saying, "I'm not your sister and why would I ever give you my car," which would reject his offer, I'd accept what he's saying and then build on his offer by saying something like, "And because you're the best brother ever, I want you and your new band, Teddy and the Bears, to be able to go on tour." So yes, and offers validation, co-creation, collaboration, and moves things forward, in this case, the scene, rather than shutting things down. So although our improv-based training is improv-based, it's anything but improvised or made up on the spot. I want to point out that the use of improv and the specifics of our training are grounded in a body of research, and it's an increasingly growing body. So improv training has been shown to improve flexibility, empathy, and listening skills among healthcare practitioners. And preliminary research also associates improv training among family caregivers with positive outcomes. So our training is informed in part by our past work that's focused on promoting quality of life for people living with dementia. We found that certain individuals have greater success, or in our research had greater success, engaging with those with dementia. Whether they were healthcare practitioners, direct care workers, or family members and friends, they all use skills that parallel those used on stage by successful improvisers. So we argue that dementia care competence can be enhanced through improv-based training, which, unlike traditional dementia care training, typically involves fun, play, and joy, and it's highly engaging and memorable. So to test this out, we piloted a version of our training for family members and friends. And if you're interested, the results appear in this month's Gerontologist. But briefly, and I will say spoiler alert, in case you're looking forward to finding out the findings, I'm going to give you a little preview. We found that the training was feasible and acceptable among family members and friends, and it also showed preliminary efficacy for improving caregivers' confidence and competence in the caregiving role. And we also found the training was associated with decreases in stress, depression, and caregivers' negative responses to behaviors that they found challenging. We also found that the training showed improvements in care interactions and relationships. So our dementia care training is focused on the development and application of an improv mindset, which is a way of thinking, communicating, and behaving. So let me explain a little bit more and break it down for you. And this is a fun photo of one of our family sessions at Emory's Integrated Memory Care Clinic.
I just have to say that I'm working next door and there's just so much laughter and joy coming out. And so that's awesome.
Yeah, I think this photo really captures some of that. So thank you, Dr. Johnson. So let's break down what an improv mindset means. First of all, actively listening and observing are necessary for connecting and meeting people where they are, which is all in the context of dementia care, as well as improv. The ability to successfully be in the moment means paying attention to the person or people in front of you, including their demeanor, their body language, and what they are saying or doing, as well as what's going on in the environment and how that might be affecting what's happening. Too often, we find that people living with dementia get dismissed, overlooked, or ignored, and that's especially true when they're accompanied by a family member or friend who might be easier or quicker to communicate with, or the family member or friend might find it easier to speak on behalf of the person living with dementia, which excludes them. So both scenarios can lead to frustration and ultimately exclusion, which is what I just said. So you can't meet people where they are without listening to them, being patient and observant to dynamics, and having a keen awareness about what you are saying or doing and how it's being received, if at all, by the other person. So in instances when you might be uncertain about what to say or do, this goes for anybody, but this is also true about with people living with dementia, including when people living with dementia might be disoriented about time or place or people or scenario. It's often best to return to the concept of yes and. As a reminder, this involves accepting, validating, and collaborating. So let's say you have a patient or a client who's anxious about time because they need to get back to work, even though they haven't worked for years. If you ignore or dismiss what they're saying, they're apt to be frustrated or angry. Anybody would be. Correcting is nuanced and typically requires knowing the person. So for one person, telling them they're no longer at work could be devastating and not align with their reality or who they think they are in that moment or where they think they are. But for someone else, it might be a relief. People with dementia tend to hear no and get corrected all the time. So unless it's necessary or you're confident in the outcome, correction is not generally the best or first approach. The most important thing is accepting what they are saying, the yes, and validating their emotions, the and, by showing concern, empathy, and understanding. So in the case I just gave you, you might say something like, I'm sorry, I really understand that feeling of needing to get somewhere. We'll try to get you out as fast as possible. I'd love to hear about the work you do. So this last part allows the person to talk about something, in this case work, that is clearly important to them in the moment. And after you validate, listen and validate, it might be possible to redirect and focus their attention on something else. Taking it further, collaborating, you could also involve joining the person in their reality, especially if, for example, they take you for a coworker or a colleague. Successful improvisers excel at making one another look good. And this means setting others up for success and coming to the rescue when things go sideways, which often they do in real life, on stage, and when you're working with people living with dementia. So in dementia care, making your partner, in this case, the person living with dementia, look good is equally important. And it involves setting people up for success by using strength-based approaches, collaborating with them to identify the most effective ways to communicate. For example, perhaps providing visuals and gestures, and avoiding unnecessary corrections or lines of questioning that could lead to embarrassment or frustration. So perhaps they come to you and you've seen them multiple times and they don't remember who you are. Rather than saying, don't you remember me? We've met last week, or we've met multiple times, maybe introduce yourself and just say that it's nice to see them. The ability to be flexible, accept failure, which is celebrated in improv, including in our own classes, and pivot are also key skills in the improv mindset. So success also means going with the flow. This means adjusting your expectations and interactions in the moment, including when a person's memory or their abilities or responses might change. In the words of a care provider, a wise one who we encountered in one of our research studies, she said, you do and try and see whatever works. Sometimes one thing works and it may not work the next time. So approaches that meet a person's in the moment needs and abilities are critical for successful encounters. And like improv, this requires creativity and openness to trying new things, which also means being open to failing. And then from that, trying a different way and accepting the unknown and being okay with uncertainty about where an interaction or an encounter might start, lead, or finish. So everything I've talked about requires being empathetic and sometimes joining the person in their reality. To illustrate this, I'm going to share a story that Amanda and I received in a thank you note from a dementia care aide who took one of our workshops. She told us, "It never crossed my mind how my job truly entails all the characteristics of improv. Yesterday, I walked up to one of my folks to begin our appointment. She made eye contact with me and immediately burst into tears. She said, 'I'm so glad you're here. I just found out I'm pregnant.'" I'm gonna let that settle for a second. So keep in mind, this is an 87-year-old woman who's living in assisted living. So according to the care aide, she said, yes, and, rather than correcting or challenging. She volunteered to listen and assured her client that it would be okay by offering to talk her through it. She also invited the resident to talk while going for a walk outside. So in the thank you note, she goes on to say that when they got outside, her client was so happy to be in the sunshine, she never mentioned the pregnancy again. Of course, this isn't something that's going to work all the time or with every person, but listening and empathetic perspective taking are always appropriate responses. I want to acknowledge that it's sometimes hard for people, especially family members, but also healthcare professionals, to fully embrace the improv mindset by accepting where the person is, going with the flow, and going as far as joining them in their reality. But for those who do, it's often discovered after repeated failures and something that alleviates frustration all around for the person providing care and the person who's living with dementia. So here's a lovely quote also from our research from a daughter whose mother was an assisted living resident. who routinely thought she was living in a hotel. She summed it up nicely by saying, "Let them be in their fantasy world. What difference does it make? I used to correct mom, but now I go with the flow." So she was following her brother's lead when her mother stopped recognizing her brother and thought he was the chauffeur. He just went along with it and said, "Yep, that's me. I'm the chauffeur today." I'm going to let that sink in for a second here. And we're going to shift gears a little bit more to talk and think about the application of improv skills. I'm going to share with you some real life scenarios and then ask you to think how you might respond and talk through each of them. So here we go.
I'll offer a quick question if I might, because
sure, of course.
This has come up in your work before where people have said, isn't the son saying that he's the chauffeur today lying? And so maybe some quick thoughts from you about this notion of truth and being present and how to navigate that. Thanks.
Certainly. I think that is a question that comes up often, and people feel very uncomfortable sometimes about stepping into that reality. In this case, I think it's not going to hurt to go along with her reality in the sense that by correcting her, that often is saying no, it's not validating where she is. So it could lead to frustration, confusion. It could also lead to embarrassment or anger if her son were to say, "Don't you remember I'm your son?" She may not remember or be frightened of him, but if she thinks that he's the chauffeur and she feels comfortable with him, then there's, I don't believe, a lot of harm. And so in this context, an improv mindset wouldn't necessarily consider going along with things a lie, because it's not a lie to them. That's their reality. So it's consistent with where they think they are in the moment. And we'll have a few more opportunities to explore that very issue, Dr. Johnson. So thank you for bringing it up. Okay, so I'm going to start us off with an easy one. So this is Mrs. Smith. She's an 87-year-old widow who is anxious and worried, and she confides in you that she just found out that she's pregnant and she doesn't know how to respond. How would you respond? So here are, oops, I can't. I'm unable to move my slides.
That's okay. You're doing great. People are beginning to answer the poll question, and as soon as
I can move the slide. Okay.
Share the poll results with you. We've got about 20 people who have responded so far.
Excellent. Yay.
I'm also responding to a request that came in across the chat. And I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And here we go. Sharing results with you now.
Okay. Well, wonderful. Let's walk through. Can I close? How do I close?
Go ahead and stop sharing. 28 of 29 of you responded about listening with empathy and inviting Mrs. Smith to talk about it. To listen attentively and argue or assure her that she could not possibly be pregnant at the age did receive one vote. So,
and I would like to talk about that because none of these are completely incorrect answers, right?
Got it. All right, we're stopping sharing. It's back to you. You have control of the
slides. Okay, I see. Okay, great. So I'm gonna, now I can't seem to, there we go. I'll just use a different way. So redirect Mrs. Smith. Let's talk a little bit through these. By changing the topic, tell her she's looking well and commenting on her on the weather. There's nothing wrong with this approach except that well, let's backtrack. Maybe there is. By not validating her emotions and her concerns first, A is not really the proper answer. You can redirect her. She may go for a walk or, comment on the weather and change the topic, but she may not let go of the fact that she thinks she's pregnant. B is also listen attentively and assure her that she could not be pregnant. Listening attentively is great. This could work one of two ways, the correction. She might get upset because she isn't being believed that she is pregnant and has this very serious concern. Or I have seen direct care workers remind people of their age when they're looking for their mother or what have you, and they couldn't possibly still be alive. And and they come to the recognition that they are a certain age and this couldn't be possible. However, she might not believe the correction. So C would be, I think, the most improvisational based response, which is listen, respond with empathy, and invite Mrs. Jones or Mrs. Smith to talk about it. And that is exactly what the direct care or the dementia care aide did in the case of Mrs. Smith when she encountered this reality. So let's go to it. Scenario number 2. And this is Mr. Jones's daughter-in-law, Alice, who accompanies him to an appointment. Alice looks tired and comments that she's not sleeping well. Mr. Jones is often up at night, worried, anxious, pacing, and seeking Alice's help. And he carries a bundle of blankets around that he refers to as a baby, and he feels the need to stay up and care for the baby. So if you were using an improv-based approach, how would you advise Alice?
So the poll is open. We've got 3 responses so far. We're going to give folks a little chance to respond, and not a made-up story.
No, not all of these are real. I had fun trying to select. I realized 2 of them have to do with babies.
That's okay.
I actually could have had multiple.
Exactly. You've got a lot of folks. We've got about half of the people responding so far. And I know even if you haven't had a chance to respond, I'll go ahead and end the poll just for time. And then I'm going to share the results. And you've got some believers here.
Yay! Okay. Well, we can walk through all 3 of the scenarios, but the most correct response or the most improv-based response is indeed scenario number A. And in fact, that is what happened. Alice decided rather than trying the other option, well, trying option B, which she would walk him back to bed and try to get him, tell him they were blankets. That didn't work for him. Of course, one of the things about improv is we're hoping improv-based training can be an alternative to pharmacological solutions. So C, I'm glad nobody picked C, but I also understand if that was something that was picked. A is definitely the appropriate answer and the most improv-based answer. And this worked for Alice, and suddenly she was able to sleep through the night. She offered to take the baby so that Mr. Jones could go back to sleep, and that's what he did. So that one worked really well. And this was after an improv class. She discovered this in the middle of one, actually, in the middle of a 4-week session. All right, so the next scenario, and I can't seem to.
You go back onto your side, and I'm gonna.
Oh, sorry.
I'm gonna end the poll for a second because folks haven't seen it, and we'll launch that poll again in a second. Hopefully, if you can try and advance your slides, Dr.
I'm
Kemp,
trying. Yeah, it's not working though.
If you look on the bottom left-hand part of the slide, sometimes you can find the little. There you go. A little bit over to the left. Sorry. There's if you start from that 3 button.
Oh, there we go. Oh, nope, that's not it.
Yep, there you go.
There we go. Sorry.
All right, so
gotta improvise this.
We'll give you a chance to read through the scenario, then we'll launch the poll. So hold on to the poll launch for just 1 second. Go ahead, Dr. Kemp.
Okay, so the scenario number 3 is Mrs. Walker, and she's a 90-year-old widowed resident and resident of a memory care community. She frequently walks around looking for her husband and becomes increasingly depressed and withdrawn as she continues to search for him and can't find him. What would you do using an improv-based approach?
Okay, we'll go ahead and launch the poll, please. There we go. The poll is launched. We're waiting for responses. And we're beginning to get responses. We've got 7 out of the 50 people who've responded so far. Thank you so much for that. And we've got over half, and so I'm going to end the poll and share the results. And again, an engaged audience that is thinking about an improv mindset here. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing. I'll let you advance your slide to show the 3 response options and talk through them.
Thank you. Having the same challenge.
Sometimes your keyboard right arrow might work if if
Yeah.
it's not
Oh,
balancing.
there we go. Okay. So the first possibility was ignore Mrs. Smith and try to shift her focus by offering her one of her favorite things, unsweet tea. Again, similar to scenario one, this is not ideal. Well, this isn't ideal because you're ignoring Mrs. Smith, but the redirection is not a bad approach, and offering her something that's one of her favorite things could work as redirection. But similar to when we talked about the first scenario with being the resident feeling like she was was pregnant, it may not take her mind off of things. It could temporarily, but oftentimes people return to the what's really important to them in the moment. B, listen to Mrs. Smith and tell her the truth. Her husband passed away 20 years ago. Write her a note and post it in her room. I've seen this go one of two ways. The note writing was a real thing, and this poor resident would wake up every morning and read the note and learn over and over again about the fact that she was widowed and relive that loss, and that did not work.
It became fresh every day for her.
Exactly. And so she increasingly became withdrawn and depressed. Now, we did encounter certain residents who were relieved by the fact that their spouse was no longer living because it meant that they hadn't left them for somebody else. So this goes back to knowing the person, and I would not necessarily suggest starting with this reality strategy. You really have to know where a person is at and what their motives are for their fixation or their concern about a particular person or situation. So B, not the most ideal, I don't think. C, listen to Mrs. Smith and tell her that you've never met her husband. Invite her to tell you more about him is the most improv-based approach of the three answers. And I think that allows her, accepts her reality. You meet her where she's at. You're not lying. You're not telling her, oh, I just saw him a few minutes ago, which is another approach. But I think this allows you to invite her to talk about him, which is clearly an important topic and an important person in her life. And we've seen this work very well. All right, well, before I wrap up, I think we're getting close to time here. I want to borrow the words of Karen Stobie. Karen and her husband, Mondi Carter, have been on the forefront of using improv to train dementia care partners for some time now. They haven't done the research, but they've been using this technique. And she says flexibility, adaptability, courage, spontaneity, listening, generosity, acceptance. These are all characteristics of an excellent caregiver. They're also qualities of an excellent improvisational partner. And I couldn't have said it better myself. So I just want to draw attention to the improv for caregiving, embracing the skills of improv, which is a video series. There's a playlist on the Georgia Memory Net YouTube channel. And the series is informed by some of the work that we've done. And you can find some additional common challenging scenarios and how you might use improv to address the skills.
The series is really great. It's great for family members. It's great for providers. Not only if you're fumbling with the QR code, I put the direct link to this in the chat. So,
oh, thank you so much, Dr. Johnson.
So thanks for that. Okay, Dr. Kemp, you can go on to the next one.
And thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity. Here's my contact information, and please certainly feel free to reach out if you want to know more about the improv work that we're doing. Thank you.
One of the things that came up when you were presenting was how and where is this training available? And so maybe you could say a bit about that. And I know that you're both an advocate for the training as well as a scientist about the training. And maybe you could provide some nuances for folks who are listening about that.
Correct. So if you go on the website Improving Through Improv, that is how you can reach Amanda Lee Williams, who is the program director for the program. We are able to, if you reach out to us, we are able to potentially work with you to deliver various forms of the training. Some of it, because improvisers ideally need to be paid, some of it is a fee for service opportunity, but we also have some research dollars and funding to be able to offer this depending on the context. So it's sort of an open dialogue, and we are in the process of trying to set up a training center through Georgia State University in collaboration with Improving Through Improv and Amanda Lee Williams. So I think stay tuned for more. Ted, you're welcome to add to that as well.
Through the past 3 years, I believe you've had in one form or another different folks engaged in this training, and it's maybe somewhere around 2,400 people, 2,500 people. And so if I recall correctly, you're certainly not the first, and you give a shout out to Karen Stobie for her pioneering work. But really, this is emerging as one of the largest training programs in this regard. And I know you've had some federal funding and hope to have additional federal funding to move this from evidence-informed to evidence-based, so that we can be sure that if we're going to spend time with people, that spending time doing this is spot on. I'll look for additional questions, but I'll offer one more thought, and that's that I would say this is very strongly evidence-informed. People like doing it. They understand what they learned, and they know when they're going to use it in real-life situations. And so there's been plenty of situations where that's happened. And sometimes your inclination is not to go to improv first. And when my aunt identified me as her grandson, I got all agitated about that. But actually, there are many better improv responses about, we're going out to have breakfast and coffee together. Isn't that exciting? So we're going to move the slides ahead one more. And I believe that we have some information about who it is that is with us today. This helps us a little bit in our planning. So a very quick poll, if you would. I know that most of you are still online, so thanks for that. And ask you to just quickly respond. I'll wait until we get at least half of the group, and we're getting close to that right now. Great. And I'm going to go ahead and just end the poll for I'm going to go ahead and end the poll for time, and then I'll let us do one more thing. I think that we have another slide that just shows about how you get your CME credit and ways in which you can offer us feedback about this session. And Heather Schickendance is coming about training your office-based staff as to how to do the mini cog. And one of those things is getting the whole team involved in workflow in your clinic. And so she has trained hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people how to do this. And so I hope you'll come back next month. And I think we have one more slide.
We do.
Great. And so here's the information about how to get your CME credit. We really, really appreciate you having joined us today. Dr. Kemp, thanks so much for this great presentation of tremendous work. And we'll see you all real soon. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.